Hello, my name is Lisa Shea, and this series is about horror authors, horror books, horror stories, and all things horror. In this particular video, we're going to be talking about Free Will, which is one of my short stories. It is 15 pages long and 4,700 words long, and I will be talking about spoilers in this, so if you care about spoilers, then I would read the story first. If you don't care about spoilers at all, then we will go forward and you can learn more about the story and characters. So sometimes when I write a short story, it's about the movement of a plot. So for example, the previous book, October Rain, is very much about a plot, about what happens to a young girl and the teacher and so on. But in this particular case, it's less about the characters and it's more about concepts. So in this case, it's about the concept of free will. And the two characters exist to explore the concept. And it's just the two characters are the main two characters in the storyline. So we start with a dingy sky over New England. This is set in Sutton, Massachusetts again, which is my hometown. And this is something that's actually been happening. There were a lot of wildfires in Quebec, and Quebec may seem like a long way away from Massachusetts, but we were still getting heavy smoke up in our sky, and it makes you think, just how interconnected our world is if we down here in Massachusetts are having our atmosphere and sky and everything being affected by something happening relatively far away from us. And of course, we know with the climate crisis and the environmental changes that this is just going to keep happening and more, that the pollution that happens in one area is going to drift over and affect people in another area. So nothing is safe from each other. There are no plastic domes that we have over ourselves to protect ourselves from what our neighbors are doing. So she's driving down the highway and she realizes that everyone else around her has their lights on. And she thinks about it, and she doesn't really want to turn her lights on, but if everyone else is doing it, maybe they're doing it for a reason, and maybe she should do it too. So she gives in and turns her lights on, and she feels better about the situation because now she's not standing out as someone who is different. So she goes to the supermarket, as she always does on Saturday, and she goes in and the music is playing, and it's a song that's a very bouncy song. And now she realizes that everyone around her is sort of moving to the music because it's a catchy tune. And she realizes that they're sort of being programmed by the music, that someone chose to put this music on the intercom system, and it's affecting how everyone in the store behaves. And we know that there's all sorts of studies after study that the type of music that is played in a restaurant or in a store affects how people eat and buy things. So it's not even an unknown thing. It's something that people know about and that they research very heavily and take advantage of. So they're manipulating us through the music and through, the colors in the walls and all sorts of different things. So we're just being manipulated left and right to serve the purposes of the people in charge there. So she goes and she's buying some food and she misreads the title as Free Will Myth. So now she starts thinking about free will issues. And she was probably thinking about them before, but just subconsciously, and now her mind is trying to bring it up to a conscious level. So she gets outside and she notices an old friend from high school, Michael. And he greets her as Jessica. So now we know these are the two characters involved in this story, are Jessica and Michael. And they decide to sit down and chat. And he is a researcher who has been researching free will. And he's come back to his hometown area to visit his mother. And the mother has dementia, but he likes to visit her because he cares for her. So they chat about all the different places they've been, and then they start chatting about how she's working at the Staples in Auburn, which actually exists, and I know people who work there, and how her name is Jessica Stapeman, and how that probably has something to do with her working at a Staples. And this also is something that has been very well researched, and you might think it a little silly that someone named Stapeman would be more likely to work at Staples. But women named Virginia tend to get drawn to living to Virginia. Women named Georgia tend to get drawn to living in Georgia. Women or people who are twins tend to get drawn to living in places that are like twin cities because you build this relationship in your mind between your name or your situation and these locations. Boys named Dennis are more likely to end up being dentists. So there's all these connections, and we think that we're making logical choices for logical reasons, but there's all these subconscious things going on that are affecting us that we aren't even aware of unless you're a researcher who's researching in this kind of topic area. So he talks about how he's researching free will, and he starts asking, well, if you think you have free will, when did free will start? Well, it didn't start when she was conceived, because she had no control over that. That was something that her parents chose. So all of us are conceived against our will, I'll say. Our parents made an action, and we were the one who resulted. And when we are growing in the womb, we don't really have free will. We're not choosing how we develop and whether we develop arms or legs or different kinds of orders or disorders, or what our hair color is. Our bodies are just running through their little programming with the DNA, and sometimes there's mutations that send the programming a bit awry, and so on. And again, I have a lot of friends and family who have Asperger's and autism, so this is part of the discussion, because sometimes it's a genetic thing that came down through the parents, so you have no control over it in that sense. Your parents were who they were, you were brought into being when you were conceived and you had it, and then sometimes the situation comes from a mutation. So your parents did not have any sort of genetic predispositions, whatever we'll say the word is. There wasn't a genetic reason for the autism. It was a mutation that happened when either the egg and cell were forming or something environmental that happened. And so the baby is completely unique for having this combination of DNA. But none of it was under the baby's control. This is all things that the baby just started forming with having that situation in place. And then when babies are born, they have suckle instincts, they have breathing instincts, they have the startle reflex. There's all sorts of things that babies do. You know, they know how to pee and poop. Babies are just born to be able to do these things, and it's not that we're making choices. We don't have free will about them at that point. And then one could say that we are building up experiences as we are a baby. So at some point we are taught to do things, and if you say that, well, we resist what we were taught, that's part of it's our brain, and our brain was designed by DNA. So our brain isn't something we chose to design in a certain way. It was designed a certain way to either follow the instructions our parents gave us or to rebel against the instructions our parents gave us. And maybe part of it was environmental. If we were raised in a daycare and we were hanging out with a bunch of other rebellious kids, maybe that helped us be rebellious. So the environment has an aspect on that too. All right, so we go down into twin studies, how a lot of things about twins are the same if they're based on the DNA that both twins have. And some of them are different if the twins had different experiences. You know, maybe one went to summer camp for horses and the other one went to summer camp for math, and that then gave them a bunch of different experiences to move forward with. So he asks her why she went to the supermarket on Saturday, and she says, I always come on a Saturday. He asks why she started to do that, and it turns out that her mother was the one that set her on this course. So she might sort of think that she has free will about coming on Saturday, but it would all started early on and set her into a routine that now she follows. And you could say, well, she could break that routine, but maybe her DNA says that she feels happier when she follows a routine, and it would be stressful for her to break a routine. So all of these things are interrelated. So we talk about how the DNA affects the way that our brain does things, and how the DNA comes from our parents, but also from some environmental things. You know, if people are smoking in the household when we're growing up, that affects your cells and so on. So he shows her two teachers' faces, and she's drawn towards the one who happens to be the nice teacher. So a lot of these things are subconscious that we don't even remember consciously anymore, but our brain still remembers some of the details about who we are drawn to and who we are not drawn to. She hates grapefruits because of genetic reasons, so again, that's affecting the things that we do. And then we go a bit into notions of heaven and hell. If someone is born and is abused their entire life and is never given a chance to have a healthy mentor in their life, then did they ever have a chance? You know, and you think especially about kids who die who had serious medical conditions and they were just in pain their entire life. And is that, you know, we could say fair. Life isn't fair. But where's the notion of free will come in there? If they're just in pain all the time, and let's say they had abusive parents, there wasn't much of a free will to exercise there. They would have had a very different life if they had lived a life without pain and with supportive parents. So a lot of things are out of our control. And if you say, well, you could think your way out of it, our DNA in our brain is out of our control. The way that our DNA works is completely out of our control. So do we really have free will? So then it talks about how the Catholic Church changed its doctrine on infants who died before they were baptized, and this only happened on April 20th, 2007, so 2,000 years after the Catholic faith was, we'll say, born, is when they finally decided that babies who were born before and who died before they were baptized don't get stuck in a limbo separate from their parents. They do go to heaven because they have not had a chance to really commit any, I mean, what kind of sin could a baby commit? And, there's the original sin concept, but is that fair to put on a baby who had no choice about being born and then had no choice about dying either? So then we talk about what we punish people for and what they're responsible for and what the purpose of our life is. Are we in charge of anything that we do? And, on the other hand, can you just absolve yourself of all responsibility and say, oh, well, I'll just go around killing people and burning ants and so on if nothing ever matters? And that's not exactly the point of it, but it's to be more aware of all the constrictions that are on us and the things that we think we're making conscious decisions about so many times. There's all sorts of subconscious things that are pushing us in one direction or another, and that we're just logically trying to justify it after the fact. So then all the cell phones in the place start squealing, and they realize that someone has launched a nuclear missile at the U.S., and it came in retribution for a missile that we launched at North Korea. So we started it, the U.S. I'm from the U.S., so I'm saying we in the U.S. sense. The U.S. started a global conflict by sending a nuclear missile at North Korea, which is not out of the scope of possibility with the way things are going right now. We launch a nuclear missile at North Korea. North Korea retaliates, launches a bunch of nuclear missiles at us, and all of us helpless people that live in the country have no choice about any of this. We did not choose to send the missile. We did not choose to have missiles sent at us, but we're the ones who are going to suffer the consequences once all these missiles land. So she asks, well, what do we do now? And she says, what can we do? I knew that things were escalating. I knew that this was something that could happen, and that's why I'm here to be with my mother. I figured if things went south, that at least I could be with my mother and I could spend the last time with her and just ride it out. So she realizes that her parents are dead. She doesn't have anywhere else to go anyway. So they go and they get a Black Forest cake. They get some forks and they decide they're going to go hunker down with his mother. His mother doesn't remember anything anyway, and she just will be happy to have people there with her, and they will see what happens. And that's the choice that she makes. But, the question is, does she really even have a choice? She didn't choose to have the missiles launched, so now she just has to react to them, and she's reacting in a way that her brain and her past experiences and her interactions with Michael have all brought together. And she decides, if he was running around screaming and being chaotic about it, she might have started running around and screaming and saying, okay, we have to grab in a car and drive, but where are you going to drive to if missiles are coming at you? So he was calm and said, I'm going to go be with my mother. And because of the way he reacted, it encouraged her to react and say, okay, I see your point. We're going to be calm. We're going to enjoy the time that we have left, and then we will just see what happens after that. So I enjoy talking about concepts about free will, and I was at an event a couple years ago, and I was doing an author event, so I had a bunch of my books out and was talking about my books. And the table opposite me was a pair of men who were talking about free will. And they wanted to engage people and talk about the notion of free will and if we had free will or not. So I got to hear them talking about these kinds of issues for a while, and it stuck with me. So and also I was raised Roman Catholic, and the issue of babies dying before they were baptized always concerned me greatly. It didn't seem right that a baby who was born not of their own volition and then who died not of their own volition would be stuck in limbo. This little entity, this consciousness, would be stuck in limbo for the rest of eternity because of things completely out of their control. And that didn't seem like a right kind of thing. So I am happier at the notion that their spirits would go to heaven. But it also brings up, that's one particular situation. But what about all the other related situations? What if someone who's a little older does one sinful thing, but there's a reason for it? There's a reason for everything that we do. And as much as we could say that we make choices in things. So many studies show that the way we react to colors or the way we react to sounds, all of it is built on subconscious things that we don't even realize are affecting us. So at what point is it really our choice, and what point is it just the way our brains have been coded from birth, have been trained to behave by our parents, our environment, and then being affected by outside stimuli, by marketing companies and research companies and so on, all these people trying to drive us to eat at a certain pace in a restaurant so that they can have turnover happen, buy more alcohol. I mean, there's just all sorts of devious things that these companies are doing to us, and we don't even realize it's happening. So a lot of things that I think about in here. Hopefully I got some of the points out more clearly. You know, this is one of those kinds of topics that I could take one of these little subtopic areas and write a whole story about it, so I really delve into one particular area. But I had a couple of things I wanted to address in this one just as a starting point to get the general thoughts out there. So let me know in the comments what your thoughts are about free will and the nature of free will. Please like and subscribe to my channel, and I will look forward to seeing you in future videos. Have a good week.